everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Conversation with Friends. And today I'm with a very special friend, David Foong. And so, David, tell us a little bit about who you are. And I think people would love to hear about your story. It's so unique.
Thanks, Shirley. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, like Shirley said, I'm David Foong. I'm currently living in Singapore. I grew up in Sydney, Australia. Currently working at a law firm in business development. Have been doing so for the past kind of half a year. Previous to that, I was again in Sydney. I studied law and commerce and began life as a corporate lawyer for about 5 years. And so lately have been making some progress into going back to some of my earlier interests that I had in high school and in my junior days, such as music and a bit of sports, which I'm sure we'll touch on in this conversation.
Absolutely. Actually, this is the whole reason why we even got in touch with each other was because of your music. You have such an interesting, you have such an interesting eclectic background, and you started kind of like an online diary of your music pursuits, again as an expat, as well as some of the more outdoors activities. I think it will be really nice for people to hear some of your piano playing, and I think they'll be pleasantly surprised because now we're talking about you and you're introducing yourself as an expat and as an attorney. But what really is interesting is your online identity is largely a musician. So let's take a look. One of the things I've really enjoyed is when you share this on Instagram. It's a very human story. It's not just look at what I can do, but there's something very human about the way you share. So tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing. I think the whole Instagram story started, right at COVID when a lot of countries around the world were going through lockdowns.
Mm.
So obviously my parents are still in Sydney. Thankfully they're doing fine and healthy, and they have a lot of kind of side pursuits that they can keep occupied with. So that's kind of been a huge relief for me. But I thought, how can I better kind of capture life in Singapore? Because aside from almost daily WhatsApp calls, it's kind of they're not here. They're not able to travel. So as we touched on earlier during our pre-chat, was I went out and got a GoPro and I started recording. I was doing a lot of running in the early days,
Mm.
and just recording the sights and sounds of Singapore as it is in 2020,
Wow.
as it was in 2020. Marina Bay Sands, Orchard Road. These are traditionally tourist attractions, usually bustling, usually a lot of people, selfie sticks everywhere. You can't, go any which direction, and you definitely bump shoulders with someone else. So that was all quiet. It was all shut. It was all deserted. So I thought it would be interesting to capture life in Singapore through the GoPro.
So let's take, wow.
Then I thought, mom and dad said, that's great. Can you do more? And I thought, okay, now what else could I do? And that kind of prompted this whole Instagram music journey. So I came back. I had a piano in the corner right behind me,
Mm.
sitting there quite pretty much when I moved in, but I hadn't touched it for a very long time. So it's only when COVID kicked in and when working from home became a proper practice of a lot of companies, my law firm as well, that I really was able to take the covers off the piano, dust it off, and start practicing. And at the same time, I started, learning how to record, learning how to set up the visuals, the image, take the video, record the audio, and kind of do a bit of editing on the iPad and send it back home. And so initially, I dabbled in YouTube, uploaded a few clips. It was great. Mom and Dad really loved it. And then I found Instagram to be a more kind of relaxed platform. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be as curated. You know what I mean? You can just, it's a more kind of relatable
Yes.
platform. So again, Mom and Dad were probably the first two, and probably only two that were looking at it in the early days. And then some relatives came on and kind of reached out and just said, keep going. And I got a bit of encouragement and confidence from that. And then friends around me gave me a lot of support and encouragement. They said, we knew you could play, and just keep going with it. And so, which leads on kind of to the present. So all of that kind of momentum has built up into the very reason why we're having this conversation. I think we connected over Instagram, and it's become that platform that really facilitates, a lot of things that can happen and can only happen through technology.
Very much so. I think the world has become smaller. And I also think people are much more open to people sharing this type of stuff, because I know I found you on Instagram, and it's kind of incredible because you get to see what people do. And I know you have a clip that was one of your very first Instagram share on why you started with this.
So my first experience of classical music came as a young boy growing up in Sydney, Australia. My mum would take me to weekly piano lessons. At the time, I was learning under the Suzuki method, which was a method that came to Australia from Japan. This method was really instrumental in terms of inspiring me to listen to other kids who were much better and more advanced at the piano than I was at the time. And I remember coming in after another student had just had his or her lesson and thinking, I want to play that piece one day, whether that be maybe at the time Liszt or Rondo alla Turca, or many of those pieces that we have come to know and love and are so familiar with today. The meaning of classical music for me today is definitely vastly different to what it was a decade ago. Growing up through high school, as is probably common to many learners of music, is that you have the constant pressures of studying for music performances, music exams, school recitals. However, once you step outside of that world, and if you're no longer working in that arena, it becomes a totally different ballgame. How do you stay motivated? What is there to practice for? And I guess that's where the meaning of classical music has shifted. As a working professional in a corporate job, right now, classical music for me is really a way to, number one, unwind, number two, to have an opportunity to really delve into the culture. As you grow older, hopefully you have the opportunity to travel to different countries, and classical music is just one of the ways that you can access that country's or a different country's perspectives through an unspoken language. And lastly, classical music is a fantastic way to access another community. Being a student of classical music allows you to engage with an audience, to discuss ideas, to challenge yourself in terms of broadening your experience. For me personally, it's an avenue that I hope to continue using going forwards. Classical music has also allowed me to touch base and reconnect with friends and family back home in Australia. This has been incredibly important given the number of circuit breaker and lockdown measures that have been in place in many countries for a number of months. And it's been an incredible amount of fun and a true privilege to use technology to really, through classical music, kind of rekindle those relationships. So right now, thanks to the content posted by Tiffany, others, including Roy Chen, and the great performers of the past, I am definitely hoping to continue this lifelong journey, I guess, of exploration, challenging myself to learn new repertoire. Right now, I've been learning Clair de Lune and a few transcriptions. I hope to keep continually improving myself and to contribute actively to a growing classical music community.
David, thank you so much for sharing that clip with us. It's so great to hear a person share about their personal passion in such a relatable way about classical music, because unfortunately, it's not an art form that's the most relatable to everyone. Now, growing up, can you share with us a little bit about your how did you come across classical music as a pianist? And I also saw your recent posting, you're also a violinist. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with classical music.
Yeah, I guess that video kind of touches on it a little bit. Again, my mom really was the driving force. She was a very vocal force for learning music and at the very early age. So she introduced me to the Suzuki method.
Mhm.
I studied with a really good teacher who was really great with children, made it fun. I really enjoyed going to classes. And, at 4 years old, 5 years old, you always look forward to getting stickers on your book or doing
Right.
well. And it was really fun. And I think the Suzuki method also encouraged less on the technical side. I think that can also be one of the criticisms leveled at the method. But I think it also encourages more kind of just
Love.
listening,
Right. Listening.
love for
Hmm.
music. Exactly.
Hmm.
I think one of the mantra of, well, the saying is, if love is deep, much can be accomplished. And that's one of
Yes.
the Suzuki's sayings. And so that was very true. And I really enjoyed it. I was terrified of performing, actually. I think my very first performance, my mom can also attest to this. I kind of didn't want to, I went on stage and that's as far as I got. I sat back down
Oh,
and I think I got in big trouble for that by my dad. But I think that also goes to some of what my personal tendencies are. So I like to kind of practice until it's perfect, and that's something that I picked up on, or my parents noticed in me from
right.
very early age, and I think that's also explains a little bit why I enjoy music in general, not just classical per se, but
Right.
just as an art form, you always can get better, and there's always new things to learn,
Right.
and the ability to kind of have a new piece of music, practice it, get more proficient at it, and share it with
Hmm.
others, with friends, family, complete strangers, is just fantastic. So, I have my mom to thank for it, and I think throughout, obviously it wasn't always very easy. There was a lot of late nights practicing,
Hmm.
exams, kind of the usual traditional story. But I think looking back, as is pretty much the case with everybody. I'm very glad that I kind of kept with it. I didn't give up, and I stuck with it. And it's kind of only now, having worked a few years in corporate life, having gone through university, yeah, I'm really starting to really enjoy it for the first time in a long time. And if the pandemic has shown me anything, it's been a really valuable source of comfort. I think that's the appropriate word for myself.
And what I think has been really remarkable is you're also sharing it with the world, because I'm on the other side of the globe and I've really enjoyed your music. And technology, and well, two things that comes to mind. You are incredibly consistent with your posting, and consistent in timing, scheduling, consistent in the content, also consistent in the physical look, and I've been really impressed with that. And but also with technology, you're now able to do things that used to be difficult. For instance, when we work on concertos, and you either need to have another pianist to accompany you, or you to play with the orchestra, which we saw the Mendelssohn, sounds fantastic, great job.
Thank you.
And yeah, and but because of the technology, we're able to do it a little differently. Let's take a look at a clip that you have shared. So now you can see we have two Davids on the same screen.
Two Davids, yes.
Two Davids, right. So now I would like to talk a little bit about what we're looking at here. So we see a split screen and we see you playing both parts. So which part is playing the solo, which part is playing the orchestra?
The solo part is the screen you see on your left. The orchestral part, and is on the right. And obviously, the easy way to tell is I've got the score in front of me and the iPad. So
Right.
technology at play there, like you said, Shirley. And what I have on the iPad is kind of what you see on the left. I have that's kind of acting as my visual prompt as to when to start playing the accompaniment, when to again, for myself, it looks fairly simple, but at least for
Oh,
relatively new to this kind of technology, it was a challenge to say the least. But yeah.
yes. Now let me ask you a question. So for, let's say, for you to record a clip, how long does it really take you? Because I think as musicians, we realize it may be a very small upload onto Instagram, onto Facebook, onto YouTube, but it's many takes in the making. So would you share a little bit of your process behind, like behind what we see? Because even this, to put this together and line up perfectly, all with audio, it's a lot of work. But how many hours actually go into the recording itself for you to play to a degree where you are satisfied? Because you mentioned earlier, ever since you were a child, you had a need to practice until it was perfect.
That's right. And I think it's gotten a lot easier. I think the definitely the editing part took a long time at the start. So kind of March, April 2020 is when I really got into it. And I can tell you, I spent much too much time on the iPad. Um, but now it's gotten to a stage where there's a process, like anything in life. Once there's a process in place, you follow the stepwise process and it becomes quicker. Not necessarily quick, but definitely quicker.
Quicker, because
And
trust the process and there is
yeah,
a procedure and you don't have as many trial and errors, because I think in the beginning we're trying to figure out what the process needs to be first, right?
yeah. And the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. So I really didn't know a lot of things. Basic things as to how to even, what's the best camera angle, what how to press the button, or how much space should I get on a memory card. Like basic things like that might seem very easy questions to answer for a seasoned professional like yourself.
Oh no, no,
But
no. This is trial and error for me, pure trial and error. And like I
so
started off this conversation live on Instagram, then I realized it wasn't going.
exactly.
Right.
We all have our bugbears, and definitely I had a lot. But since then, I mean, nowadays the technological aspect, at least the process I have in place, it's not professional by any standard, and definitely it's
It
something that I
looks
would like
really,
to
really
improve.
professional. Just so you know
Thank you.
that. Yes.
Thank you. But definitely, there's so much I can improve on. But now that there's a process in place, the most time-consuming aspect is now, thankfully, learning the pieces. So, quite a few of the pieces that I've posted and shared are pieces that I've kind of played before or sight read before, so that makes it a little bit easier. But I'm getting to a stage where now I do want to learn new repertoire, and learning new notes, learning depends on the difficulty of the piece, but
Right.
that is the most time consuming aspect. And like you said, when you try to fit that in around your other hobbies or the day-to-day job, that can be quite a challenge to motivate yourself to kind of go back
Right.
to
Right.
what you're supposed to do, which is practice, slow practice, especially.
I want to ask you some questions about actually about how you practice, because being a busy person, the classical repertoire you play, because you play some non-classical repertoire as well, but the classical repertoire you play are very challenging. They're far from the beginners. They're very challenging repertoire, and you play them very clean. And even if you have played them before, to play them this clean, there is a specific way you practice. Recently, I've been reading a book. It's called The Talent Code, and I've also always been a lifelong studies for peak performances, which it goes back to how you practice. You obviously are someone who has both the right side and the left side of your brain. So can you share a little bit of your practice, how you practice with us?
Yeah, sure. There's not too much um, to it, but basically, I I could also be a lot better with this now, but I do start with a few scales always at the start. There's some major scales, minor scales, melodic minors, etc. Some octaves, some thirds, at least 5 to 10 minutes worth,
Mm-hmm.
just to get the fingers warmed up.
Mm-hmm.
Just like eating breakfast or brushing your teeth, you really need the fingers need to warm up and just,
Yes.
it also gets your brain, or at least it gets
Yes.
my brain into a certain rhythm, so that I'm not, or if I launch straight into a piece, like one of, the more technical pieces, quite quickly you can get flustered and you know what, the rhythm is just not there.
Right.
So that gets me into a kind of a steady state. And then from there, I just try to be a bit more disciplined. I don't play everything, as loud as it should or as fast as it should.
Right.
My electronic keyboard has a metronome function, so I've been using that a lot lately. Right now, I've been asked to do one of these collaborations with another person who reached out on Instagram, and she said, "Oh, could you learn?" Sorry, I think this battery is low on my phone. Could I learn Liszt's Mazeppa, which is, as you know, it's part of his suite of transcendental etudes. They are incredibly difficult, and Alethea, she reached out and just said, could I learn it? And I think to take that as an example, that has a lot of octave leaps, that has a lot of thirds in successive, bars, and just that, and in general, a lot of slow practice, a lot of kind of varying it up, syncopated rhythms, just to kind of trick your mind into kind of trying to play more cleanly and strike the right balance between virtuosity and kind of just bare simplicity of just playing the right notes. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you can get into a process where you just want to get to the end result. You don't want to go through that whole process of painful, slow, methodic practice, and you just want to get to like a Lang Lang or Yu Zhao Wang standard. It just doesn't happen. At least it doesn't happen for me. So it takes a lot of slow practice.
I think it takes a lot of slow practice for everyone, and I think trusting the process and having the mental strength and discipline to go for that kind of practice is really, really important, which leads to another side of your Instagram uploads, and which is very athletic and very outdoorsy. And I know you have shared a clip that also helps us to see where you are, because you were born and raised in Australia. Now you're in Singapore, but your family they were originally from Malaysia, right?
That's right.
So it's a very multicultural background. So let's take a look at the clip of your more athletic side that also helps us to see a little bit of the country where you're in right now.
30th of August 2020, we're just at Marina Bay doing one of our runs. Got some friends, Jazz, Kehong, as you can see, Gardens by the Bay. Now we're approaching Supertree Grove. This is one of Kehong's favorite spots. They have many events here, usually around Christmas time, Easter time.
Great spot, especially in the evening. We do the Supertree night shows, 8:45 and 9:45.
Wow, look at that.
Coming from Australia, right? One thing I wondered was, what was this area before like Marina Bay Sands was around, before Gardens by the Bay? What was this whole area?
Yeah, it was just water, and like this whole area, you're sitting on reclaimed land. And I think in the next 10 years, the whole landscape would completely change, especially after they move the port area. They're moving further west, I guess, because there's more space further west.
Yeah.
And in downtown area, you probably want to have like more social activities or residential areas.
Yeah, housing is always key.
But yeah, they will definitely change Singapore's landscape.
Alright folks, so we've come to the end of our run. We just want to finish off with a cool view of Bayfront and the new Apple Store.
It was really interesting to see what it looks like in Singapore, because it's so different. And I remember growing up in Taipei, Taiwan, I was used to having a cement circle around the trees because they only allowed enough soil for the trees to come up. So then when I moved to Los Angeles, my family and I thought we moved to the farm because people have yards. So I thought it would be very interesting to see what your life is like outside of your apartment, which is now your apartment is very different than I think people are used to, who live in Australia,
Yeah.
who live in the US. And share a little bit about the size of the apartment and the lifestyle in Singapore with us, please.
Yeah, I think by and large, just as a general point, I think we're very lucky. You know, especially just from an expat's perspective, Singapore is very well set up. And my apartment itself, the size is 657 square feet, which is relatively sizable. I'm living by myself here. It's more than enough space for me. Has
Right.
everything I need. Kitchen, space for the piano in the corner, enough space for a study and a desk. So, and then around it, like the development itself has some facilities that residents are able to use. So at least it encourages some physical activity. And
Hmm.
then what beyond that, like you just saw, Marina Bay is skip and hop away from where I live. So it's very convenient. And Singapore is such a small place anyway, so it's very easy to get around. But on that video, just Gardens by the Bay, Marina Bay, I think what the government has done in terms of designing Singapore, they've tried to create, a garden within a city to the best of their ability. And there is a lot of greenery around, and there's enough kind of open spaces for people to just walk around and just engage in physical activity. So that's kind of what my life outside of this apartment looks like. So I'm not always trying to practice with a metronome at home. So I hope your viewers don't get that impression. Otherwise, my neighbors will definitely complain. But I do try to, get outdoors as much as possible. And I think, similar to Taipei, physical activities are possible
Yes.
around year round.
Yes.
So it's really easy to just put on a singlet, shorts, go for a run, come back,
Right.
and start the day again. Yeah.
Well, your life is certainly very interesting. And I think it's really nice for people to see because the social media has allowed people to present themselves for what they do. And we're able to listen to your music and watch a portion of your life. It's really nice to get to know the person behind those short little stories, right? Those little postings and understanding where does this music come from? Who is this person and what motivated you to do this? And I think the pandemic has also opened us up to really be interested in what other people have to offer in the fine arts. And so I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And hopefully we'll get another chance to do more of this type of conversations. And thank you. And I love your music and hope you join me again. So until next time.
Thanks, Shelley. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.